Thank you. Well, it's great to be back in Dade City and back at Simpson Lakes. We've done things here before. I know it's a very popular spot for weddings and other types of events, and it looks really, really good. So I want to thank Commissioner Simpson for hosting us. I also want to recognize we have the President of the Florida Senate, Ben Albritton, with us today, as well as his colleagues, Senators Truenow, Hooper, and they even let in Blaise Ingoglia. So thank you, guys. We also have the President of the Florida Farm Bureau, Jeb Smith, and I want to welcome him as well. And we've got a lot of great folks that are here for the bill that we're about to sign. Most of the people in this room know how important of a role agriculture plays in Florida's economy, but also in Florida's culture, particularly from the very beginning of our state all the way through. It's been the lifeblood for so many families and for so many of our citizens. Today, we're home to over 45,000 farms and ranches. That's over 10 million acres of farmland just in the state of Florida. We have a lot of really, really significant things that are produced here. I know, as many of you know, we count for over half of fresh tomatoes, nearly 40% of all bell pepper, 42% of grapefruit, and of course 1/3 of all oranges. I know there's been an issue. We've worked together on that for many, many years. But our floriculture sales account for 18% of the U.S. value, and that's over $1.16 billion for natural agriculture production. We have 140,000 jobs, and the total agriculture production for everything is over $11 billion. Just here in the state of Florida. So that's a big deal. There's a lot that goes into that. We've been very helpful since my time as governor. I know when the commissioner was in the Senate, we were able to do the Right to Farm bill to update that to make sure that folks were able to earn a living and to pursue their dreams without excessive government interference. We also have done a lot to preserve farmland. We did the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. That provided hundreds of millions of dollars for Florida's farming, forestry, and ranch land to be preserved. You know, we've done a lot apart from that too. The Florida Wildlife Corridor, we've done a lot on Everglades. You know, I'm proud that the state's growing, and there's a lot obviously to do, but we don't want the whole state to be a parking lot. We don't want the whole thing to just be cement. We want to make sure that this part of Florida is preserved. And so that's had a big deal. I know the commissioner and the cabinet has worked with me already to protect over 140,000 acres of farmland from being sold. And I think, you know, most of the time it's sold, it ends up being, you know, a housing community or something like that. And look, people want to move to Florida because so many of these other states get all this stuff wrong, that they want to be in a free state. You know, people ask me about, oh, well, you know, you guys are doing this, you're doing that. You know, how do you guys do it? And I say, well, there's a lot that goes into that. But as governor, I do have a cheat code. I can simply look to California, Illinois, New York, and then do the opposite of what they're doing. And it usually works out pretty good. So we've got a lot of people that want to come, and that's fine. But we also want to make sure that we're doing what we can to preserve an important part of Florida's heritage. You know, we even did something last year on this lab-grown meat. And, you know, people said, oh, well, let people, you know, choose to do lab-grown meat. And some people said it may not be good for you, it may not be safe, we don't know yet. But that really wasn't the reason why I signed the bill. The reason why I signed the bill is that this lab-grown meat is part of a larger agenda. People like the World Economic Forum, others, they view agriculture as the problem for global warming. They view cattle as the problem for global warming. And so it's not that they just want to give consumers a choice with this. Their goal in pursuing this is to basically drive the cattle industry out of business. And that's not going to happen today. If we had not done the bill, it wouldn't have happened today. It may not happen next week, next year, but that is the goal. So we can sit there and just act like that's not the case, or we can nip it in the bud. So we chose to just nip it in the bud. I'm not playing the games of the World Economic Forum. I want to make sure that we preserve the cattle industry, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the entire United States of America. And that was one part of a battle that we fought that wasn't limited to agriculture, but had a huge impact, and that's this whole idea of so-called ESG, environment, social governance. We launched a frontal assault against this in Florida many years ago. See, now it's fallen out of favor. At the time, it was like the thing to do. You have these massive companies falling all over themselves to try to do ESG scores. What's this? What's that? And part of the ESG was they really wanted to kneecap the way farmers did their jobs. A lot of the things that go in to modern agriculture, they did not want to even allow that to happen. That was their ultimate vision with some of the ESG stuff. And so, it went just beyond agriculture. It went into a whole bunch of other things where big financial institutions had to have like DEI policies. You had to have all this other stuff. And you know, some people said, well, ESG, it's private sector, let them do what they want. The problem is these weren't just business decisions. They were trying to change our society. They were trying to change policy, basically, without ever having to get elected to anything, without ever having to go through the process and actually do that. They just wanted to kind of collude together, asset managers, big companies, all that, and impose this worldview through the sheer force of their economic power, and that was unacceptable. So we stood up against it in our pension fund and all across all avenues that we could, when it really wasn't popular to do so, when we were going up against some pretty powerful institutions. But I can tell you today, the number one reason why you don't hear as much about ESG is because Florida was really the one responsible for killing ESG when we took our stand. In fact, you know, the head of BlackRock was, you know, he was kind of the visionary behind it, and then he was asked like last year, like, whoa, you know, ESG's kind of falling apart. So you got guys like Governor DeSantis, they've made it toxic because they're always out there come criticize. But it's true, we really led the charge on that. That had huge impact for our society, but it definitely had major, major ramifications for our agriculture community. And so I was glad to not only lead those efforts, but have a lot of support for folks in the Florida legislature at the time. And we got it right in Florida, and other states have followed. And now, under the Trump administration, people don't even talk about ESG anymore because the tide has shifted. Another thing we've led on, and some other states are following, but we need more. We also need to see the federal government do something similar, is we passed historic legislation to protect agriculture lands from the encroachment of the Chinese Communist Party. I don't want China owning farmland in the state of Florida or anywhere in the United States for that matter. It's too important to our sustainability as a people, as a country, to allow a hostile Communist Party to take control of this. And you know, when they buy it, it's not going to say the Chinese Communist Party buys this. No, I mean, these are front groups and all this other stuff, and we've done a good job on that legislation to really police that. So we were probably the first state. You know, on all these things, usually we're the first, but if we're not the first, it's like we're like second or third, and it's just because some other states have earlier legislative sessions than we do sometimes. But we were definitely leading the charge on that. And we've done that, and so that is something, and it's not just farmland, that's something that's important. It's by any land near critical infrastructure. Our military bases. Why do we want the Chinese Communist Party to be buying land near our military bases? Or utilities and plants, power plants. Of course we don't want to do that. So I'm glad that Florida was able to lead on that. Now it brings us here today, SB 700, is the farm bill for the state of Florida. It does a lot of things that I think a lot of people are really going to be happy about. One, and we've already did an event on this, you know, you've had this debate, and really Florida's led on this too, partially because our Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, has really led the charge by going to counties and saying forcing fluoride into your water is actually not good. There's risks associated with that for pregnant women, for young people, for kids. And yes, use fluoride for your teeth, that's fine, but forcing it into the water supply is basically forced medication on people. They don't have a choice. You're taking that away from them. And so he really led, you had a lot of county governments, including Miami-Dade, that were saying we're not going to force the fluoride into the water. people want to use it on their teeth, great, but it's readily available now. And so that led to this being put in the Farm Bill to say, that local governments cannot engage in this fluoride forced medication. So the counties that did it are great, but now that's going to apply statewide once we sign the bill and it formally goes into effect. And it raises a larger issue about, and I think we saw a lot of this with COVID that we had to fight back against. They had certain views. You should wear a mask when you're outside in 95-degree temperatures. No, thank you, but that's what they were saying. They were saying that kids should get a COVID mRNA shot, even though we still don't have data to this day to justify doing that. And so they tried to push a lot of policies on people. And I think what it is I think some of these people, they think that they know better for you than you do for yourself. They think because they have medical training or they have this, that they should just be able to decree how we live our lives. And that proved disastrous during COVID. I mean, a lot of the things they were advocating not only didn't work, they caused a lot of harm. I mean, just think, when we made sure that the schools were open, I got sued by the teachers union saying close the schools. We had all these people, Fauci was saying this is irresponsible and all this stuff. They'd have had these kids locked out for a year and a half. It was up to them. So we fought back against it. And I think this fluoride is a good example because what they're basically saying is they're ignoring any studies that have shown that there could be issues if you're overexposed to this, particularly for pregnant women and for kids. But they say, well, it's good for your teeth, so we should just force it. And you shouldn't have a choice in that. We certainly now in our society in 2025, we have the ability to deliver fluoride through toothpaste and mouth and all these other things. You don't got to force it and take away people's choices. But the whole crux of the issue is you should be able to make decisions on the basis of informed consent. So you should be able to take information, you should be able to talk to folks, your doctor, your friends, your family, whatever, on any of these issues, and then make an honest judgment about what you think's best for you and your family. Forcing this in the water supply is trying to take that away from people who may want to make a different decision rather than to have this in water. And honestly, this is a much bigger issue. I mean, the fluoride is kind of one touch point, but it's a much larger issue about how some of our physicians treat different patients. There are places in this country where folks are denied medical treatment because they didn't get a flu shot or they didn't get an mRNA COVID booster. I mean, first of all, the COVID boosters, people still get COVID. The idea that is like something that you should have negative consequences because you decide not to is ridiculous. And the flu shot, I was in the Navy, they would force me to take these flu shots. And it's like, honestly, sometimes you have a negative reaction to it, right? And the data on it is not great. It's very underwhelming. And so to say that someone that may need medical attention, that you're not going to treat them because they haven't done this, that is not what informed consent is. That is saying if you don't do what they're telling you to do, you're going to have really serious negative consequences. Well, it's not a free choice at that point. And you even have some pediatricians, they will not take children as patients unless the children get all of these, like the COVID jab. And first of all, CDC put that on the immunization schedule, and we were opposed to it from day one because there wasn't data to support it. We were the first state in the country to recommend against mRNA shots for kids. And people would say, we think it may be harmful for kids. We didn't even need to go into that debate because there was never data showing a benefit to kids. And so if there's no benefit shown through a clinical trial, then how are you even doing this? But that's what it's coming to in this country, where you're penalized for making a choice based on the available information. And I don't think that that's right. I know we extended some of our medical freedom protections this year with some of the legislation that was passed. But honestly, we need to do better in Florida. We need to make sure that parents are able to make choices without suffering consequences for rational decision and choices that they make. But I think this fluoride thing was important. We're leading the way on it. We got kudos from the HHS Secretary, RFK Jr., and I know a lot of people were happy to see that, and I think you're going to see a lot of states that are going to follow suit with that. So we stand for informed consent, and I think that's really, really important. This bill also builds off previous ESG discrimination prohibitions to include protections against discrimination based on certain environmental policies or artificial emission targets. You know, some of this stuff, and obviously it's on the decline with the Trump administration replacing the Biden administration, but it got to the point, you know, we rejected a lot of the Biden highway money, hundreds of millions of dollars, because in order to use it, I had to jump through these DEI hoops and these ESG hoops. They wanted us at the state of Florida to monitor your tailpipe emissions from your vehicles. I ain't doing that. I'm sorry. And so we sent it back to Elon Musk. And Elon is happy to take it. Biden's people, they didn't know how to take it back because no one had ever given up money back. But I think it's really important that we strengthen those ESG protections, and this does do that. And also, for the first time, this bill provides the state with the ability to return solar fields back into agricultural production, which, you know, this solar, look, first of all, I'm not opposed to solar, right? But, like, we shouldn't be doing Green New Deal policies where you're trying to put a thumb on the scale. Environmentally, people act like because there's no carbon emission from a solar panel, there's a lot that goes into producing those panels that they don't want to tell you about. But then what happens? It takes up massive pieces of property. It's not nice to look at, but then it really degrades the property. There's a lot of waste that's created. So I think transitioning some of this stuff back into production, I think that's going to be really, really positive for the state of Florida. And I can tell you, we did an energy bill 2 years ago or I think it was last year, where we basically said in Florida, our energy policy is not to stop global warming, because we can't, I mean, that's ideology. Our policy is about affordability and reliability. And that's important for consumers to have the most affordable options. And if you look, our utility rates in Florida are half of what they are in California. Now, I would like to pay, I think everyone would like to pay less always, but the reality is the states that have done the Green New Deal policies, the costs have gone up. But reliability, you guys have been through, we had Helene, we had Milton, those further south, we had Ian in 2022. We've had 6 major hurricanes in 7 years in this state. And, you know, we had 10 years where we didn't have any hurricanes, right? And historically, that's the way it goes. You tend to get some, and hopefully we're beyond that, and hopefully we've got a little runway here. But the reality is one of the best things that you can do, apart from the emergency response if anyone's life or safety is in jeopardy, which we do very well at the local level and at the state level, working together, and have saved a lot of lives. But the best thing you can do is to make sure that the lights are on for everybody. If you get everybody's lights on, then everything else you have to do to recover from a hurricane becomes much simpler and much easier. Well, some of these policies around the country where you have to have a certain amount of solar and wind into the grid, well, what does that lead? It leads to blackouts. That's what it leads to. So Florida's been very reliable, and I'm really excited to do that. So I'm not against if people want to do solar, but I don't think we should subsidize it, and I don't think we should harm traditional energy, and especially Florida. We've had huge decrease in carbon emissions over the last 10 or 15 years, not because of solar, because of natural gas replacing coal. That's been a huge, huge thing, and that's been very, very reliable, so I appreciate it. This bill also strengthens our foreign influence laws by prohibiting charitable organizations from soliciting or receiving funds from hostile foreign countries of concern, and that includes the People's Republic of China, Russia, and Iran and Cuba. So I want to thank them for doing that. So we're happy to be able to do this. I think that you're going to see a lot of positive coming out of this. I know Senator Truenow was instrumental in doing it in the Senate, and I want to recognize him as well as Representatives Tuck and Danny Alvarez in the House for their diligent work, delivering policies that hopefully will have a really positive benefit for Floridians now and in the future. And so with that, before we get to signing it, we're going to have some more comments, and so I'd like to invite up. We'll do one at a time. We'll do Simpson, Albritton, and then Jeb Smith, and so we'll start with the commissioner.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for being here today. This is at least 60 people that we were anticipating being here today. I really appreciate everyone coming and the interest on this bill. It's very important to agriculture, not only agriculture though, but consumers of the state of Florida. And just as a note, this is our third year in a row now we've gotten our farm bill signed, so we're very proud of that accomplishment also. And the governor mentioned it. In the last few years, we've done a lot of things like ban fake meat, ban foreign enemies from buying our ag land. But this year's bill is uniquely, I think, positioned over consumers and agriculture. The fluoride ban the governor mentioned, we learned all of these things during COVID, what governments are willing to do to our population. And I've said this several times, I've kind of regretted it. I was like, well, what's next? They're going to put Ozempic in our water, right? Because they know better than us. We should all lose a bunch of weight. And so anyways, we've banned that this year in the Farm Bill. We're very proud of that. All medications, water should hydrate, not medicate. We've been very clear on that. The ESG lending practices, the governor was one of the first to fight against that in this state. In the legislature, when I served in there, we did many bills fighting these efforts. But we've discovered that in agriculture, they're still in our lending standards. So this year, we are banning it from agriculture. We do not want to buy into the 2035 rules, the 2050 rules, because what their goal is really just to put us out of business. And so no small farmer could comply with these types of discrimination. So in this bill, it offers a lot of opportunities for us to not only sue but fine these organizations if they choose to use ESG lending practices. We also deal with drones in this bill. That's another one. After this bill is signed today, people will not be able to fly over your agricultural property and harass your livestock, your animals, your people without written consent of the farmer. Now, if you give them consent, they can certainly do that. Sportsmen, hunters, shooting ranges and things, they will not be able to harass those organizations without potentially spending some time in jail, which is something we have not had in the past. Protects food labeling, right? We have soy milk and almond milk and all of these things and things that they call meat that have nothing to do with milk or meat. If it's not grown on a hoof, you're not gonna be able to call it meat. And if it's not out of an udder, you're not gonna be able to call it milk. So we're very proud of that in this farm bill. Now we've banded together. There are gonna be multiple states around the country that are gonna have to sign this, the Southeastern, to make this official, because we don't want people to have mislabeled food products, and we're not, this bill identifies that. We also protect our Second Amendment rights. A lot of people still get the concealed carry license even though you're not required to in the free state of Florida. You don't have to get it, but if you do get it, before we had several loopholes that this bill is consolidating, which will make it much quicker for people to receive those permits. And the last thing I really wanted to mention about this, and I'm very proud of this, with our FFA and 4-H students. So when you think about what we've done in the last 3 years for those kids, 3 years ago we did a grant program in the legislature that said, if you're going to participate in the FFA, we will grant the dollars for parents, because a lot of parents wanted to participate, couldn't afford it. We went from 30,000 kids 3 years ago to over 60,000 kids today that are participating in FFA. We're very proud of that. And then we come to step 2 of that, is that then the school systems would not allow them to have an excused absence to participate in FFA and 4-H events. So last year, we said, you know what, we're not gonna do that any longer. It is an excused absence, mandatory excused absence to participate in 4-H and FFA events. So checkbox number 2. And then this year, it's about zoning. Well, we would love to participate in FFA and 4-H, but our zoning won't allow us to build those type of facilities at our schools. This farm bill says that no, in an educational facility, you can build that infrastructure to help support agriculture. So we believe when this bill is signed that this is going to really unleash the full efforts of parents and children that want to participate in agriculture, FFA and 4-H. I was talking to the Federation of Fairs this morning. I said, get ready. In 2 or 3 years, when these barns go into these cities and communities where they currently can't have them, you're going to have a lot more FFA kids show up at your schools, a lot more 4-H kids show up at the schools. So we're very proud of what you're doing here today, Governor. You've been a champion on these issues. Our Senate President's here today. I know he's speaking next. We're very proud of the legislature. I was in the legislature. It was different then. We were saying yes or no to things. Today we're now begging. And but the legislature has been very good to the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Very proud to have the president here today.
And just before I turn it over to Ben, you know, on this, because Wilton raised this issue of things like soy milk and all this stuff. First of all, I don't do any of that, right? I mean, I do milk and meat, and that's like kind of how I am. And I think a lot of people are like that, but others are not. But I will tell you this, whether it's legit or real or not, the one experiment I know is that there was one day where our kids in second, first, and pre-K, and they were probably even a lot younger then, that they were very hungry, and they asked their mom to please make them macaroni and cheese. The problem is we didn't have any milk in the refrigerator. So the First Lady decided to use the soy milk to make the macaroni and cheese. Let's just say that did not go over well with our kids. And to this day, they still give my wife a little bit of, you know what, about the fact that she tried to do macaroni and cheese using soy milk. Ben?
Hello, everyone. So, first of all, I want to thank you, Governor, for your support of Florida agriculture. You've been steadfast in all the efforts that you've brought through, and thank you for that. Commissioner Simpson, thank you very much, not just for your leadership in the agency today, but through the legislature. The list of your accomplishments are very, very long, something you should be proud of for sure. Jeb and Ed, Blaze, Keith, thank you very much for being here. Then I also want to thank you, Wilton, and Governor, for using all of my talking points. That's fantastic. I want to point something out to the people in this room. Yeah, that's true. I want to point something out to the people in this room and anybody that can see us out there through the cameras. The Great Seal of Florida has in God we trust. That's important, right? God is praiseworthy. I'm thankful to God for everybody in this room. When I look around here, I'm myself, I'm a fourth generation citrus grower, and I look around this room and what I see is I see a lot of folks here that are multi-generation farmers. It is part of the DNA of Florida. The governor mentioned that earlier, but it is absolutely part of the DNA of Florida. It is, quite frankly, I think the best part of Florida. Whether it was 1 acre or 10 million acres, Florida farmers bring a value that nobody else can bring. The resilience, you used the word resilience, Governor. Florida farmers are resilient. We don't know any better, right? Whether it be a storm or a disease, all we know is how do we get to the next crop? And the great news is back home, most everybody that I spend time with grows something for a living. Now, you can learn a lot from people that go through that exercise every day. And they understand the difficulties, but they also understand the successes and how good it is to be able to sell a steer or harvest a crop and be able to see sometimes years-long efforts produce something good for your family and the communities. So I applaud everybody here that grows something for a living and anybody that can hear my voice out there. We are thankful to God for you. We are thankful that you are in the fight. The Florida Senate, I can tell you, for various reasons, but we are in the fight to support Florida agriculture. It is very, very important. One piece I will mention that was not part of this, that one piece y'all didn't take. Imagine a hurricane comes through, God forbid, right? And you have your family and you're trying to evacuate, and you are going down the road and you come to a gas station, or you're trying to just get out. Right? You come to a gas station and there's no power, right? Gas is in the tank, it's below the ground, but you can't have access to it. You come to the next one. Same thing, you're at a quarter tank in your own car. You can't get access to it. One of the things this bill does, and it's very important actually, there's a grant program that is built into this legislation that provides for access to funding to put switches, connect switches at these convenience stores. So when hurricane evacuation or when hurricane recovery is happening, those families will not have to search on and on and on and on trying to find gasoline just to keep their family safe and get out of harm's way. These switches will go a long way to making sure that we have generators are connected to these places and we'll have access to that gasoline. And the last thing I'll leave you with is this, and this is very important. Remember this, If you eat, you're involved in agriculture. Thank you.
Well, I tell you what, it blesses my heart to see such a large group of folks, and Governor, from all over this state, from ranging in ages and commodities. Thank you all for being here and showing the importance of what this is to Florida agriculture. Give yourselves a round of applause on that. I want to say thank you, Governor DeSantis, for signing this today. Thank you, Commissioner Simpson, for your leadership, and others as well. It is truly an honor to be able to stand alongside leaders who govern, and I will say by upholding our values and by conviction, consistently putting Florida and its people first. You know, agriculture is not only the backbone of Florida's economy, it is the cornerstone of our national security. You know, from fresh produce on our tables to the fiber and foliage that support countless industries, Florida farmers and ranchers work tirelessly to feed and supply not only our state, but the entire nation. Their work is vital, and it deserves policies that protect and strengthen their ability to succeed. The Florida Farm Bill is a critical step in that direction by addressing essential needs, such as, and one thing that wasn't mentioned, our workforce housing for legally verified agricultural workers. This legislation ensures that our farmers have access to a stable, dependable labor force, and it supports those who follow the law, contribute meaningfully to our communities, and help keep our agricultural economy thriving. You know, we commend Commissioner Simpson, Senate President Ben Albritton, House Speaker Danny Perez, Senator Keith Truenow, and Representatives Kaylee Tuck and Danny Alvarez for their leadership and commitment to this issue. Their work on the Florida Farm Bill directly supports agricultural production in Florida, and Governor DeSantis' broader efforts to combat illegal immigration while also assuring adequate employment by providing the workforce required for our state's agricultural industry. By prioritizing legal workforce solutions, this bill reinforces the governor's mission to protect Florida communities, uphold our legal standards, and put Floridians first. This bill is the result of exceptional, great leadership in Florida, targeting practical and deeply supportive of both our economy as well as security interests. We are proud, as Florida agriculturalists, to stand behind the Florida Farm Bill, Governor DeSantis, Commissioner Simpson, and the legislative leaders who have made this a priority. Thank you all for all that you've done.
Okay. All right. Gather around. All right. So today is, what's today? May what? 15th? Put your phones down, please. Please. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you could put your phones down, please, all the photos will be available.
So I've got young kids. Who wants a pen? How young? You're maybe young enough for that. You're mature enough. You can handle permanent. Anyone else? Any kids out there in the audience? Do we have any more? Anyone want to bring something home for their kids? Okay, there you go. These are the normal ones, so you guys want anybody? One more. All right, here we go, guys, right here. Good deal. Thanks, guys. Good job. All right, well, good work. I'm glad you got such a great turnout. I want to thank everybody who does a lot of important work for our state. It's an important industry, important for the culture, And I know a lot of folks, it's funny, there's a lot of people in this country that think of Florida and they think of Disney World or Miami Beach and like that's it. And they don't even realize, that we have major cattle industry. I guess people know citrus, but some of the other stuff people don't know. So it's it's a great story to tell and a big part of the state's culture. Okay, do we have any questions?
Governor, do you view your appearance here with Senate President Albritton today as a sign of unity between you two as you have criticized the House and the negotiations continue?
I think it's more just the fact that there's things that are important here. I mean, I've been very passionate about the fluoride issue. I think it's important to not have forced medication. We have worked well together. I think he's somebody that is trying to do the best he can to represent his constituents, to obviously manage his caucus, and then ultimately to do what's best for Florida. And I think that's the way, it should be done. And quite frankly, that's been the way that that has traditionally been done in Florida over these years I've been here, for sure. Look, I'm very frank when I see things in the other chamber that I don't think are consistent with what the voters sent them there to do. But ultimately, this stuff all works itself out.
Yeah, Governor, do you plan to sign House Bill 6017, the one involving medical malpractice, allowing relatives to sue if there's a death?
No, because it would cause malpractice insurance premiums to skyrocket. The folks that we talked to universally said that. And the thing is, you can sue, right? That's a misnomer. You can sue for economic damages. What they want to do is to sue for non-economic damages. What that is going to do is that's going to lead to a flood of lawsuits against practitioners and against hospitals. Malpractice premiums are going to go up. It's going to be harder to recruit physicians into Florida, and ultimately healthcare costs will go up. What I suggested that was done, and I know there was some support of it in the Senate, is that if you had caps on the amount of damages people could seek, that would disincentivize a lot of jackpot justice. And so if you had situations, you already can do economic damages, then you would be able to do non-economic, but you would not be able to kind of hit the lottery. You would be able to potentially get within the realm. And so that, I think, is what's missing. And, we've spoken with a lot of folks in the healthcare, hospitals, physicians. It was pretty overwhelming in terms of the concern, that they had on it. If there were caps on that, then it would probably be something that people would be able to live with. But when Governor Charles signed the reforms back in the early 90s, because this undoes what Governor Charles signed back in the early 90s, we had massive malpractice insurance crisis in Florida, and we still have very high premiums for malpractice insurance. Part of it is, we've had a lot of litigation over the years. We did have caps that were put in that the old liberal Supreme Court said were not constitutional. I don't think that was the right decision, and I don't think this current court, would reach the same conclusion. But that was done because they were dealing with a crisis. And I understand, obviously, and as somebody who respects physicians, I also lived through COVID, and I understand that they get things wrong. So I'm not opposed to holding them accountable for medical malpractice. To the contrary, I think you need to do that. And I know there have been people that have been victimized, had family members, and it's a really, really sad thing. But I also know you have to look at the global view. What is it going to do for the overall access to care, prices, the willingness of physicians to come here? And that was very clear to me in speaking with folks. Yes? Do I have a message for the victims' families? Yeah. Well, the victims, part of the frustration of this, I support capital punishment because I think there are some crimes that are just so horrific, the only appropriate punishment is the death penalty. And I know there's some people that disagree with that, and that's fine, but that's my judgment. The problem, though, is that, these folks go through, and it takes forever to be able to do this. And I want to have process, and the courts don't always get it right. And if someone is wrongfully convicted, you want there to be a backstop for sure. But man, the fact that it takes so long, so I think in most of the families that I've spoken to who've lost loved ones at the hands of really brutal killers, there's just always that frustration with waiting. And it's like you never get closure. And so this can't bring their loved ones back. But I think what it can do is at least provide some closure that this whole legal enterprise has come to a conclusion. They don't have to worry about something happening down the line. But it's, when you see these things across your desk, these are brutal, brutal crimes. And I'm not suggesting that, some of the crimes that don't merit the death penalty aren't brutal too, because there's a lot of stuff. But this stuff is just overwhelmingly sadistic. It shocks your conscience. And that's just not the way that a civilized society can function. So part of it is an appropriate punishment. Part of it is it expresses the outrage of the community, because if you do something less than that, then potentially you're sending a signal that, yeah, it's bad, but not as bad as it could have been. No, these are the worst of the worst, and we're very united in doing that. So we have a lot of sympathy for the families that have had to gone through these ordeals. It's not easy to lose a loved one. I mean, some of these folks, had brothers, sisters, children, nieces, nephews. I mean, it's really, really bad stuff. So we're working through these cases. We take everything very seriously. It's an obligation I have as governor to oversee it. There have been times when we've had things and there were some people had questions, but anytime we go forward, I'm convinced that not only was the verdict correct, but that this punishment is absolutely appropriate under the circumstances. Thanks, guys. We'll see ya.